So welcome back to this video where we'll be going over 2.1, which is all about solving quadratic equations. So let's get on with it. So in the past, you would have dealt with questions like this, where you have to factorize a quadratic expression. So in this case, we have x squared minus 2x minus 15. But now, what we're going to do is we're going to solve that. So we are going to make this equal to 0. So now we have to solve the quadratic equation. So we need to find the x values where this equation would equal 0. So to do that, you do the same thing you would have done before, which is factorize the quadratic expression. So if we factorize x squared minus 2x minus 15, we've got to think of two numbers which can sum to make minus 2 and multiply to make negative 15. So those two numbers would be minus 5 and 3. Therefore, we would have x minus 5 times x plus 3. Okay, and then that would be equal to 0. So now we're at this stage to work out x values. What if we have an expression like this, okay, and it equals 0? That must mean that either x minus 5 has to equal 0 or x plus 3 has to equal 0. So therefore, if we have x minus 5 equaling 0, then we get x as 5. And if we get x plus 3 equal to 0, therefore we get x as minus 3. So those would be our two values for this question. X would be 5 and x would also be minus 3. So for this question, we have 6x squared plus 13x minus 5, and that is equal to 0. So again, we just need to factorize. So what I do in this case, the way I'd factorize it, is if you do 6 times minus 5, that will give us minus 30. And then we now need to think of two numbers which sum to make 13 and multiply to make minus 30. So in this instance, those two numbers would be 15 and 2. Okay, be careful because you may think that it could be 10 and 3, right? Because, 10 and 3 must equal 13. But remember that if you have 10 and 3, that will give you a positive 30. In this case, we have a negative 30, okay? So in this case, it would be 2x. It would be a minus 2x, okay? And it would be a positive 15x, okay? Because minus 2 plus 15 gives us that positive 13x, and then minus 2 times 15 would give us the minus 30. So now we have this. Now we want to kind of factorize these two things separately. So if we have 6x squared minus 2x, and then I'll do a little bridge in the middle, and then we have 15x minus 5. So now I want to factorize these two things separately, okay? So if we do that, if we factorize 6x squared minus 2x, then a 2x would come out of that. So we get a 2x. And then we'll be left in the brackets with 3x minus 1. Okay, and then we do the same thing with the 15x minus 5. So in this case, we would get a 5 would come out. Okay, so we get a 5. And then again, we'll be left with a 3x minus 1. So at this stage, which is good because both of the values, all the values inside our brackets are the same. So we know that one of our brackets has to be 3x minus 1. And then whatever's outside of the brackets, that makes your new bracket. So in this case, we have 2x plus 5, okay? And that is equal to 0. So just like the previous question, now we have these two expressions, these two, all these algebraic expressions inside the brackets, they are equal to 0. So now, if we do 3x minus 1 is equal to 0, that will give us, if you work all this out, you will get x is equal to 1 over 3. And then we have 2x plus 5 is equal to 0. And if you work that out, you'll get x is equal to minus 5 over 2. So with this question, we have 2x minus 3 all squared, and that is equal to 25. So there are loads of ways you can do this. If you thought about doing this way, where you do 2x minus 3 times 2x minus 3 is equal to 25, and then maybe you look to expand the brackets out and then move the 25 over, and then you'll get a nice quadratic equation. You can solve it. You can do that, but there is a faster way. In this question, we don't need to do anything like that. We can actually get rid of the power to the 2. So to do that, we need to square root both sides. So if we square root both sides, we get 2x minus 3 squared. And then if we just square root both sides like this, okay, now we are left with 2x minus 3 on this side, and we're left with plus or minus 5. Now, remember that when we're square rooting numbers, in this case, we have no other information. So when we square root this 25, it could be a positive or a negative 5, because minus 5 squared equals 25. 5 squared also equals 25. Therefore, it's a plus or minus 5. And then from there, we can just use algebra to work our x's. So let's bring the 3 to the other side. So we get plus or minus 5 plus 3, and then that will leave us with x is equal to plus or minus 5 plus 3 over 2. Okay, so now we're at this stage. Now we can work out our two solutions. So if we do that, let's consider x being positive first. So therefore we get, not x, consider 5 being positive first. So therefore we get positive 5 plus 3 over 2. And that will give us a 4. But then also if x can also be not x, 5 can also be a negative. So we get minus 5 plus 3 over 2. And then that would give us a minus 1. Okay, so in this case, our two values would be 4 and minus 1. But again, if you wanted to do it the other way, where you expand the brackets out and then make a quadratic equation equal to 0, by all means, you can do that. You'll still get the same answer. It will just take you a bit longer to do. Okay, so for this question, we have 5x plus 3 equal to the square root of 3x plus 7. So to work out this question, what can we do? Well, like the previous question where we square rooted everything to get rid of the power to 2, we do a similar thing here. In this case, we actually want to square both sides to get rid of the square root. If we square both sides, we get a 5x plus 3. And I'm just going to write it as this because we're going to be expanding the brackets later. And then that will leave us with a 3x plus 7. So I've just squared both sides, okay? So by doing that, I get rid of the square root, but then I have another 5x plus 3, which we are going to expand. So if we expand this out, we get a 5x times a 5x, which is 25x squared. And then we get a 5x times 3. And then we get a 3 times 5x, we get 15x plus 15x. Then we get a 3x, 3 times 3, which is 9. And that is equal to 3x plus 7. So if we simplify this down, we then get a 25x squared plus 30x plus 9. That is equal to 3x plus 7. And if we bring now the 3x and the 7 to the other side, we get a 25x squared plus a 27x plus a 2, and that is equal to 0. Okay, so now we're at this stage. So very similar to previous questions. To work out this quadratic equation, I'm going to do 25 times 2. That gives me a 50. And then think of two numbers which can sum to make 27 and multiply to make 50. That would be 25 and 2. So therefore, we would have a 25x and a 2x. It's effectively like that 27 splits up into 25x and 2x. And then we want to factorize these two separately. Okay, so we have a 25x plus 25x, and then we have a 2x plus 2. If we factorize these two separately, with this 25x squared plus 25x, we can take a factor of 25x out, leaves us with x plus 1. And we can do the same thing on this side. If we take a factor of 2 out, we are left with x plus 1. So that means one of our brackets has to be x plus 1. And other brackets has to be 25x plus 2. Okay, So now that we've got that, we know that this is equal to 0, and therefore, if we work out what x is, therefore we get x plus 1 is equal to 0. So we know that x is equal to minus 1. We scroll up again, and therefore we also have 25x plus 2 that is equal to 0, which means that x would be a minus 2 over 25. So if we have two numbers like this, we have x squared plus 3x plus 1 is equal to 0. If you try and use our normal method of thinking of two numbers which can sum to make 3 in this instance and multiply to make 1, there isn't any. So how do you solve it? Well, we can always go back to the quadratic formula, okay? So the quadratic formula is minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a, okay? And that is where, in this case, that is when we have a quadratic equation in the form ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0, okay? So we can apply that to any quadratic equation, even ones which are maybe more simple, we can still apply it to them. So now I'm going to apply it to this question here. Okay, so for this question, if we have x squared plus 3x plus 1 is equal to 0, if we use the quadratic formula, therefore we would get a as 1. Okay, a would be 1, b would be 3, and then c would be 1. Okay, so therefore we'd have minus b, so we'd have minus 3 plus or minus the square root of 3 squared minus 4 times 1 times 1, and that is over 2 times 1, okay? So if we simplify this down, we get a minus 3 plus or minus the square root of 3 squared, which is 9, minus 4 times 1 times 1, so that'll be 9 minus 4, which is a 5, and then we get, so 2 here, because 2 times 1 is 2. Okay, so if I scroll up, so if we have something like that, therefore, well, it's already done for us. This would be the answer. The answer would just be a minus 3 plus or minus root 5 over 2. We can't do anything else with that. Depending on the question, they may want you to leave it like this, so keep it in this third form, or they may want you to give it to a certain amount of significant figures. It's really up to the question. But in this case, we can just leave it like this. So our answer is minus 3 plus or minus root 5 over 2. Okay, and this will be our last question today. For this question, we need to give our answer to 3 significant figures. So to do this question, again, what we need to do is we want to get it in that form of ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. Because if we get it in this form, then it becomes a quadratic equation which we can solve. So if we try and get this in that form, all we need to do is bring that 7x to the other side. So if we bring the 7x to the other side, we get a 2x squared minus a 7x minus 11, and now it is equal to 0. So now we can solve this quadratic equation. But again, if we try and use our normal methods of working this out, so let's say we have 2 times minus 11, which is minus 22. If we try and think of two numbers which sum to make minus 7 and multiply to make minus 22, there aren't any. The only factors of 22 is 1, 2, 11, and 22, and none of them can give us 7. Therefore, we have to use the quadratic formula. Okay, so let's start off using the quadratic formula. So if I just rewrite it over here, it's just minus b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And in this case, we have a as 2, we have b as minus 7, and we have c as minus 11. Okay, so let's work this out now using the quadratic formula. Okay, so if we do that, we will get a minus 7, that gives a positive 7, plus or minus the square root of b squared. So b squared is minus 7 squared minus 4 times 2 times minus 11, and that is over 2 times 2. So that will give us a 7, a plus or minus. We get a 49 minus a 4 times a 2, which is minus 8. And then a minus 8 times a minus 11, that is a positive 88. And that is over 4. Okay, let's scroll up. So now, if we work this out, we get a 7 plus or minus the square root of 49 plus 88. So that will be a 137 over 4. And there is not really anything else we can do with this. We cannot simplify this down anymore. We can't do anything, but we don't need to because the question wants us to work it out to 3 significant figures. So this is where you can use your calculator like I'm going to do. And we have our 2 solutions. So if I do 7 plus the square root of 137 divided by 4, then to 3 significant figures for the first value. So if I just write that here, for 7 plus the square root of 137 over 4, to 3 significant figures on my calculator, I get 4.68. And then if we do the same for the negative, so we do 7 minus the square root of 137 over 4. Therefore, if I do that on my calculator, I get to 3 significant figures. I get a minus 1.18. Okay, so those would be my 2 solutions, 4.68 and minus 1.18. And that is where we will end this video today. And then in the next lesson, we'll go over completing the square. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you soon.